Good evening, race fans. Welcome back to TRTN for tonight's coverage of MSC's LMU Series Season 1, Round 2. And as always, I'm Regan Clark. You join us here at the mighty Circuit de la Sarthe, as we have a few troubles with the PC. You may just have to give us one moment here. Well, sincerest apologies, as we've had a few issues there with encoding. Nonetheless, you join us here at a track that requires a little introduction. Part of the motorsporting Triple Crown, the Circuit de la Sarthe was founded in 1923, comprised of 30 turns and 8.4 miles of FIA Grade 2. It is a dime a dozen here, one of the greatest tracks in the history of motorsport. To catch us on board here with that of David Silf. We did run into a few issues in terms of the stream settings there. We are just quickly looking into that for you as we're in the midst of free practice. And we're just going to quickly run a few checks here just to double check everything. Do apologize there for the possible interruptions, as things have been a little bit wiry around the edges there, getting things up and running for round 2 of the championship. Of course, here in the Circuit de la Sarthe, 30 turns and 8.4 miles of FIA Grade 2. Now, this particular configuration is the old Mulsanne circuit that was discontinued in 1989. It is the one that finds itself without either of its chicanes. We're on board at the moment here in the closing 10 minutes of free practice, on with that of David Silf, driver who was so close to his chances of the podium in the last round of the championship. Sadly ended up finishing 5th place in Sebring at the season premiere. And while a little bit of an underwhelming introduction to things at Le Mans, things are about to pick up into full swing warfare here at the second round of the championship. The first endurance race of the series, 90 minutes, set to follow here in Mulsanne. And taking a look at the session itinerary, we're coming to the end of 10 minutes of free practice on, 60 minutes of free practice, on to 15 minutes of qualifying, then into our 5-minute break where we'll be talking about Toyota in the American Rally Association. Then we're on for 90 minutes of racing, and while technically no pit stops are mandatory, we will be seeing plenty of them as changeable conditions are on their way here for the second round of Season 1. As we follow on board with Silf, getting a look at the session timings at the moment. Find Noah Burkhoff, the driver who won in the last round in Sebring, leading the time and chance ahead of Michael Simic in second. And then David Silf in third, Steve Derrick fourth, John McConville in the top 5. A few new drivers to introduce ourselves to by the end of this session. We do appear to be having greater issues, at least in terms of the... Just having a look here, just in terms of the encoder settings and the video settings, something is a little bit spotty with our broadcast here. So if we do suddenly hop off the air, you'll know for what reasons that is. At the moment, though, taking a look on board with Silf, as he crossed the line there, third fastest, and remains that for the time being. Taking a look at the qualifying information surrounding Silf, we've got plenty to break down in the upcoming qualifying session here in Le Mans for the first time ever on TRTN. And onto his flying lap then. We'll get a full tour of the track in the next couple of minutes here as Silf starts his new flying lap. Checking on with John McConville as he makes his way, as it stands then, down towards the Ford chicanes at the end of the track here. So let's go and catch on board with John McConville. Will be our unofficial tour guide here at Le Mans. Making our way then through the Ford curves into the Virage du Raccordement, onto the opening straight. So starting things off, our Tour of Le Mans, courtesy of John McConville with McLaren, starting things off on the run up towards the Dunlop curve. You can see off in the distance there the Dunlop Bridge. That's soon to be replaced as it stands after several decades in the sport. New tyre sponsors creeping in to take that away. So on the run up over the Dunlop curve, through the Dunlop Bridge, down through towards the Relantis Dunlop, or the Dunlop chicane. Down towards then Tetra Rouge. Curb down Taris as we make our way on to the Mulsanne straight. Now, of course, with this being the old Mulsanne circuit, we do have roughly in the ballpark of about 3.7 miles of back straight here. It is the longest back straight in motorsports history, and it's going to make for a very long traffic train for our drivers today. Heavy slipstream based racing down the Mulsanne straight. Nothing to break it up here, so we don't have either of the two chicanes. As you'll see there to the right hand side would have been the first chicane of two here on the Mulsanne straight. The drivers will get a clear run down a bit, so they're taking a bit of a trip down memory lane. As mentioned earlier on in the broadcast, you're in a bit of a muddled start for us here because of a few issues regarding OBS. It's been a case that this is the old Mulsanne circuit, sometimes just called the Mulsanne circuit without chicanes, and this was discontinued from mainline circulation in 1989. Ever since, we've featured both of the chicanes. Making our way then, the Curb de Hernandiera. I still struggle with that word. Down towards the Virage de Mulsanne, otherwise the Mulsanne corner. Heavy braking zone here, so a lot of that racing comes to a screeching halt down through this area. Very short runoff, so ultra dangerous in a mixed class category, but for our singular GT3s today, doesn't look to be too much trouble this time around. On the run down through the Curb de Golf. As it stands then for McConville, 2 yellow sectors at the moment. Target time, which is the fastest so far, was set. Taking a look here on the timing charts by Noah Burkhoff, 3:43.929, as we make our way then down through to Indianapolis. Then into Arnage. These two very sharp corners run right next to one another. Very heavy action spot, as we've seen in many, many years of the running of the 24 Hours of Le Mans, an event that has existed on the calendar for coming up on 103 years in the World Endurance Championship. Through the Curb de Bresson. Heading up into the Porsche curves here. You see from McConville at the moment 2 yellow sectors, but again with a track so large, so expansive, there is the chances here that he could tie things up in that 3rd sector. But as we saw from watching on board with the number 95, there is rain hitting the track, and that is only going to continue to become a pressing factor in the race to follow. So heading in towards qualifying, we are looking, at least in some degree here, of more stable conditions up towards qualifying. Heading into the pits though, just after the Maison Blanche, is John McConville coming into the pits. At the end of this free practice session, you can see the rain starting to pick up on track here. So taking a wider look at things as the paddock starts to build up. Just taking a look in the free move camera, you can see coming into his pit box then the McLaren of John McConville. Currently marks one of the only cars remaining on track. The only other out on track at this time is Archie Bowen. Taking a look on board then, coming to the end of this session, about 1 minute and 23 seconds left to go. Bowen, as it stands then, is in 11th place, yet to put a time on the charts, but will be looking provisionally at 10th should he be able to let this one in. But as it appears, with only 1 minute and 10 seconds left to go, it is going to be the case here for Bowen that this outlap will not suffice as a valid place on the timing chart. We'll have to wait towards that qualifying session just around the corner before we get to see anything of the like. We will see and make note of as well here. Archie Bowen presently finds himself as one of 2 Corvettes in this category. Now, just before we get to the end of free practice, amidst a bit of a muddy start there for us in terms of the tech, we are able to discuss the championship standings. After the first round in Sebring, then it's Noah Burkhoff who leads ahead of Michele Pascalini, with Michal Simek in 3rd place and Francesco Cugino in 4th. David Silf in 5th place ahead of John McConville in 6th. Tvutko Sojcic in 7th place ahead of Steve Derrick in 8th. Ruben Thomas in 9th place, and Steph Hannes rounds out the top 10 as we get into the closing seconds then here of free practice before we get into the second qualifying of the season, and I imagine one that stands the test of time for many a driver here. We're at legendary, hallowed ground for motorsports. So this is going to make for a very, very magical qualifying session indeed. At the end then of free practice, Bowen's into the pits. Taking a look in then, you can see from the paddock, that's Jonathan Curran and Noah Burkhoff to your left and right. Burkhoff fastest, 3:43.929. Fastest time of the session from Noah Burkhoff. So then, waiting for the session to get underway in terms of qualifying. Are we expecting another pole position from Noah Burkhoff? We saw things to be rather interesting in Sebring, especially throughout the 45 minutes of racing we were given the opportunity to cover in round 1 of the championship. We wait then for the start of qualifying just around the corner, then 15 minutes, so we're told from the session timers. Currently, the paddock falls silent for the first time here in Le Mans. Looking over, we can see the second fastest car there, the purple and white Ferrari of Michael Simek, 190. Presently 1.261 seconds away from the fastest lap. Closest gap is currently between David Silf and Steve Derrick. Those two separate by 34 thousandths of a second on the standings. As we see there, Steve Derrick in with a brand new livery there on his Ferrari. Just getting a look in with the Ferrari there. That's Steve Derrick from the paddock at the moment. Trying to get a look in on what that is. I'm struggling to make out the image of it at this distance. We're taking a look in there with Steve Derrick. It appears... Oh, never mind. I suppose we'll have to wait for the opportunity thereafter. We can see starting into this qualifying session. And actually, we'll have to halt our timing charts just a little bit early. As we see, making their way out, Michele Pascalini first among the fray, right behind them, Michael Simek. Then behind them, we can see this is one of the new drivers for round 2. Callum Amkreutz with Aston Martin. We see with the Spirit Racing of Le Mans livery. Now making their way onto the track first among the fray. Now with 15 minutes in the qualifying session. Out onto the track then goes Michael Simek. So once again, as per conditions here in Le Mans Ultimate, sadly no qualifying predictions to go off of in the same way that we have for ACC, which we'll be covering later on in the week here with the folks at MSC this Friday for the first round of Season 4. Here in the second round, however, of Season 1 of the LMU series, we're still in the blind as to who could emerge on pole position. One thing is for certain, it will be really a story of the fastest as to who comes out on top of things here in Le Mans. Yellow flags out, the car going slow, and by looks of it looked to have been Tvrtko Sojcic, yes, down at Dunlop. Immediate trouble for the Lexus. What is going on here? Rolling towards the wall, bounces off the wall. Is he liable to get going? We can see they're stopped just before the Dunlop chicane. He's back in to the paddock, so we go back on board with Michael Simek, now leading the fray. You can see behind them in the background, that's Michele Pascalini behind them, Callum Amkreutz. We can see Noah Burkhoff. Currently in the slipstream of Burkhoff is Francesco Cugino. Then tucking into Cugino's slipstream is Archie Bowen. We can see here from the point of view of Bowen. Looking at this speed now, ignore where it says kilometers per hour. We actually ran a check on this. We were rather confused. 183 kilometers an hour is roughly about 114 miles an hour. So make no mistake, that's not 100% the case there. No, that's reading in miles an hour, but it says kilometers an hour. So rather confusing stuff. We see here from Bowen's point of view, in that slipstream, you can hear in your left ear there that thunderous 6.3, and that is Noah Burkhoff right over the left-hand side of Archie Bowen as we head in towards the Mulsanne curve. You can see just a little further up the order there, that's the Ferrari of Michael Simek leading that charge, as we see here on board with Simek. The Czech talent then, third place in the championship after Sebring, made his way to the podium in the trailing end to that hectic opening round. We'll see what he can do though here in the second round and the first 90-minute enduro of the season. So nothing to report on timing so far. We're still on the outlaps for our drivers as it stands. Definitely a lot of high hopes there riding for Noah Burkhoff, but we've seen for Mercedes, they're no faster in the straightaways than their contemporaries at Chevrolet, courtesy of the Corvette C8R. I mean, you can see here with Archie Bowen, he's up and ahead as it stands there of Noah Burkhoff. He was able to hold up alongside him on the Mulsanne straight. presently looks to put a bit of challenge here in the early parts of qualifying to put himself up and ahead of Callum Amkreutz's Aston Martin. A lot of drivers then jostling for position in the opening qualifying charge. They all want that clearest part of the track to themselves, not riding around in each other's dirty air. They're not going to be doing themselves many favours, bar for the run down the Mulsanne Straight. Of course, without those two chicanes, this is something they'll become very much aware of. Oh, into the wall there goes Callum Amkreutz. The Aston Martin in big, big trouble in the early parts of qualifying. That's Amkreutz back in to the pit lane, catching on with Noah Burkhoff and Archie Bowen as we make our way through the Maison Blanche into the Ford chicane in just a moment's time. So we're going to go and catch back on board then, just as they make their way down through into the Virage de Raccornement onto the opening straight then. So starting their flying lap, we'll stay on board with Michael Simek for the duration of this flying lap. On with the Ferrari. Our first flying lap then here at Le Mans. What a privilege it is for us here on TRTN. Never, when I started this off, did I ever think we'd be able to come to this legendary circuit. And now we have touched holy ground on 2 of 3 of the Motorsports Triple Crown. The only thing left for us is to find our way some way or another over to the Circuit de Monaco. What a pleasure it is to be here at Le Mans though. Tetra Rouge coming up just onto our right hand side there. Provisionally that fastest opening sector, 37.838. Now scoping that up against the rest of the field, Noah Burkhoff put in a 37.597 in sector 1. So things looking rather interesting here in the scope of a potential 2-horse race to pole position, Simek versus Burkhoff. Now, of course, we are on board here with the Ferrari, and I would like to advise those tuning in just now to ignore where it says kilometers per hour. We did run some checks on that. That is actually reading miles per hour, as about 181 kilometers an hour, which is what we saw the top end to be for the Aston Martin of Callum Amkreutz. Actually scopes out to being about 114 miles per hour. So I don't necessarily think it was kilometers an hour being reported here. It's worth pointing out, though, 181, the Ferrari is struggling to hit the upper end of that. Now, if we go and take a look just briefly on with Noah Burkhoff, we see also topped out at 181. It's actually Cugino to have somewhat of an advantage here, 182. The Lamborghini of Pasqualini is down at 180, just touching into 181 there. Back on board with Simek. Seems that unlike ACC, where we've seen rather dramatic differences in straight line speed performance, here on LMU, we may have finally found the great divider, or the great unifier, I should say, that being the Mulsanne Straight. 76.777 then for Simek. Taking a look at those timings, Burkhoff still faster in that middle sector, 76.085 according to our timings. So as it stands in this opening flurry of laps, it could very well be the case if he changed things together here in that third sector. Noah Burkhoff is looking at an early pole position, but really not too far behind at all is going to be Michael Simek in the Ferrari. Down towards Indianapolis, a bit of an upset there for the Ferrari. Bear in mind, Ferrari, a winning manufacturer here at Le Mans, albeit that being with their 499p prototype, a revolutionary addition to the field. But fun fact, same underpinnings of that V6 of what we find here in the titular 296. On our run then towards the Porsche curves. Here proper into sector 3, catching back on board then with the Ferrari, Michael Simek. And here we can gauge that throttle control and braking control off of the Ferrari. Very delicate as it stands there, not trying to get too lead-footed. He's not topping out too quickly. And the use of the brakes there is really only as a cornering aid. He's not actually trying to get the car slowed down. He's trying to get the car to pitch in. So using the brakes to turn there, very clever stuff we're seeing from Michael Simek. So then through the Ford curve. Down through to the Virage de Raccornement, down towards the line then. As we bring up the tower on the left-hand side, we'll see the time start to pour in here. So Simek across the line, 3:45 to 87. Then from behind, Bowen, Sojcic, and Burkhoff. So it appears there. Sorry, McCoy across the line there. Sojcic actually not to the line just yet. So as it stands there, Simek down to second. Burkhoff fastest for Mercedes. You actually see a bit of a prang there, almost, between himself and Archie Bowen, currently third in the session. Steve Derrick, as it stands there, was momentarily fourth, but is now down to fifth place in the number 3. John McConville from behind him goes fourth with McLaren. Currently back at the timing charts then, Robert McCoy. We'll see, though, where the rest of the field stacks up against. Presently here we see in the third sector Tvrtko Sojcic with Lexus. Now we know Lexus to be great in straight line speeds over on Assetto Corsa, but what can they bring to the table here on Le Mans Ultimate? Definitely left a lot up to the imagination here when it came to the opening sector. Was actually gunning in towards possibly the 4th or 5th, perhaps even 6th fastest in terms of that opening sector. Middle sector was a little bit spotty here. We see the third sector wrestling with the car. Sojcic down towards the line. What could he put in on the timing charts with 6 minutes left to go? Down across the line then goes the Lexus. Where does he find himself? 6th place, so dead on with that prediction there. 6th fastest up and ahead of McCoy. Lexus into that top 6. They'll be starting, by the looks of things, there on the 3rd row. Presently, getting a look in towards where the rest of the drivers are located on track. Well, making their way in, we see among several drivers is Alfie Graham. Also saw starting there, actually no finishing, sorry, their flying lap there, as we see just down through the Ford chicane, down through the Virage de Raccordement is Jonathan Curran with Porsche down to the line. Where does he find himself across the timing chart? 7th as he crosses the line. Coming up from behind him is Alfie Graham. We see him making his way down to the Ford chicane, just having exited Maison Blanche. Down to the line then. Second McLaren onto the timing charts. And where does Graham find himself? 10th as he crosses the line. 3:48, 8:37 for Alfie Graham. So we see Pasqualini and Cugino still in that charge to put times on charts here, and we can still see just a little further up the road is Michael Simek. Now, yellow sectors there, 4 tenths off in the first, 7 tenths off in the second sector. That is leaving much to be desired here for Michael Simek. Currently finds himself only 3 tenths away from the fastest time set by Noah Burkhoff. Archie Bowen currently third, off by 9 tenths of a second. So Corvette up on for the podium here. We'll see if Bowen can challenge Simek or Burkhoff by the end of this session. To see things come down to such fine margins on a track as large as Le Mans is quite the surprise, I must say, here in the second round of the championship, for things to tie up so quickly. Heading in through to the Maison Blanche, we see here with Michael Simek, but we'll be focusing more on the cars behind him, that being Michele Pasqualini and Francesco Cugino. These two still yet to have put times on charts here. They're 11th and 12th, provisionally out of those timings at the moment. As they make their way down to the line, they'll be starting their last flying laps of qualifying, so it passes by very quickly for these two. Down to the line goes Pasqualini. We see further down the line, I believe there is Cugino. Yes, Pasqualini second. Then we saw Simek back up to second place. Noah Burkhoff, new fastest time. Then from behind them is Cugino. Sadly, as it stood, did not put times onto the charts there. Very confusing stuff. Catching on with Steve Derrick, making his way to the Ford chicane. Still trying to get a grips here onto what that livery is. So I'm seeing there a few esports sponsors. NZXT I'm seeing on the side of the car at the very least, but still trying to figure out exactly what that livery is. But it is rather interesting. Nonetheless, Steve Derrick, 8th fastest in the session so far. And while we stay on board with this bizarre paint scheme for the number 3 Ferrari, let's get a look at the timing charts here. Noah Burkhoff ahead of David Silf now as the Lamborghini goes into second place. Going up and ahead of Michael Simek in third place. Michele Pasqualini 4th, and Callum Amkreutz for Aston Martin, though despite early troubles in qualifying, now finds their way to the top 5. But stability, a continued concern here for the number 10. They're back into the paddock, but settles for a top 5. Archie Bowen also in the paddock at this time, a little shy to make their way out on track. We see here for the Corvette, as it stands then, 6th fastest furthest up the order for any of the Corvettes, the nearest to them being McCoy down in 11th. Now, we've yet to see times here out of two more drivers, being Cugino and Ruben Thomas. And the times since, though, we've also seen another driver who I was supposed to speak of just a little earlier on onto those timing charts, as we see reconnecting to the session, is Carl Domingo. Now, set to drive for BMW, but as you can see, they're in the placeholder car. And they're not the only one alone in that assertion. I believe also there, yes, that's Ruben Thomas. So both of these two will hopefully have their cars rendered in on that opening grid. Domingo 12th. Ruben Thomas still yet to put a time on the charts here, and it looks like it may very well be too late for Thomas's chances. They'll be starting 15th for this session. We see here with Alfie Graham making his way down towards the Maison Blanche, just on the exit of taking a look here out through the SS Ducating, down towards the Ford chicane then. So you see it's two green sectors for Alfie Graham, so he is looking at an improvement here across the line. He goes to 11th, still with enough time to play with one more lap here at Le Mans. So taking a look at who is nearest to the line, we see among the fray here is Francesco Cugino. Two green sectors at the moment for the Ferrari. Trailing in his midst there, Noah Burkhoff. You've got to hand it to him here. He's played things very tactically over the course of this session now, albeit he has backed off massively in the second sector. You see Sector 2's times 80.762. He's off 4 seconds off his personal best, despite being 68,000 up over his fastest in Sector 1. Burkhoff still holds that fastest time over Silf by 1.6 seconds. And Silf is not too far behind him at the moment, just on the exit of the Porsche curves. So he is hunting him down. We see here two purple sectors, 61 thousandths over the fastest, and then 7 thousandths in the second sector. David Silf could be looking at pole position here in Le Mans. This is rather exciting stuff to see there for Lamborghini, out through the Maison Blanche, in towards the Ford chicane. Bear in mind, we're about to see Cugino, one of those timing charts right in the very trailing end here of quali. Down to the line goes Cugino, and 4th place there for Ferrari. Noah Burkhoff backs off in that last flying lap. David Silf to the line. Can he go fastest? Not this time around. He's to 2nd, though, ahead of fellow Lamborghini Michele Pasqualini. Down to 3rd place, and so it appears then Noah Burkhoff on pole position. We're not quite done yet, though. Among several drivers here, we see down towards the line. I believe we also heard there was the sound of one of the McLarens, so I'm in my rights to assume that may have been McConville. We see for Derek down across the line, finishes this session in 10th place. McConville in 9th. Alfie Graham still expectant to the line. Same story there, in which applies to Tverko Sojcic on his way through the Porsche curves. On his way through Sector 3. Into the karting S's. Now on the run to the Maison Blanche we go here with the Lexus, still gunning for a position inside of the top 10 for the grid. This is going to make for very interesting stuff to see. So Tverko Sojcic down to the line then. Here we go. Out through the Ford curve into towards the Virage du Recordement. Hitting the checkered flag then at the end of qualifying from 11th. Where do they find themselves? And so it stands there at the end of quali. They stay in 11th place. Among the last cars to the line here, we see Jonathan Curran down through the Porsche curves in the number 1 Porsche. Clad in the MSC livery. We spoke about it a little earlier on in this series back in Sebring. It was something I was quite a big fan of in looking at some of those stripes up along the side. It gave me sort of that BAR Honda vibe over that C-pillar, but also looking at that central stripe, it's giving me a little bit of the Renault Lotus era from the 2010s and the Lotus E21. Down to the line then goes Curran from 7th up to 6th at the end of the session, pushes Callum Amkreutz down to 7th with Aston Martin. So great hustle there, and that brings about the end of qualifying here. We'll get a look at that grid in just a moment's time. This is quite something to behold then, right in the trailing end of quali here at Le Mans. Amidst a bit of a troubled start, we can't apologise enough there for the technical difficulties that ensued here in the opening 10 minutes or so here on TRT. And a little bit of trouble we've had there with OBS. No idea where that came from. We foolproofed the system all the way in towards this round, and It seems that something was amiss when we pressed the record button for the first time. But we'll have a look into that as and when we go live next for LMU. Of course, this is the last time we'll be covering Le Mans Ultimate with the folks over at MSC for the foreseeable future, with commitments currently to ACC and the Wednesday evening slot being taken up by the forthcoming 11th season of VSR's GT3 Championship over on Assetto Corsa Competizione. We'll be seeing that through to next Wednesday evening at 7:30 Greenwich Mean Time. As it stands then, we are just moments away from the start of 90 minutes of racing here at Le Mans for round 2 of the LMU GT3 Championship Season 1 by MSC. Of course, taking just a brief look back into that session itinerary, we'll be talking about Toyota's recent entries with Seth Quintero into the ARA. They're looking to go head-to-head with Subaru Motorsports USA in what is going to be an exciting next era for American Rally. And then we'll be getting into 90 minutes of changeable conditions racing here in Le Mans. Rain to be expected here at the Circuit de la Sarthe, so it's going to make for a very exciting ordeal for our drivers ahead. 15 cars in all in this session. As we wait to see then the drivers line up on the grid. We'll take a look first then at the standing order for round 2 of the championship. And then we'll get into that discussion of Quintero's entry with the Corolla RC2. As we see there, the grid clear out as we're about to see then.
Teams and drivers go to the grid for a race start.
So then we've been given the all clear for the drivers to gather onto the grid. About a minute and 20 seconds left to go, so we won't actually have the time to talk about, sadly, the American Rally Association. Normally we have those 5-minute breaks here on MSC. I believe we'll be going without. So taking a look at that starting order, trailing out of qualifying today then on that first row, Noah Burkhoff and David Silf, a very close end to their qualifying, 4/10 away at the end of quali here in Le Mans. Row 2, Michele Pasqualini and Francesco Cugino with Lamborghini and Ferrari making up 3rd and 4th place. On that third row, we see Mikhail Simek and Jonathan Curran, we saw recently up to 6th ahead of Callum Amkreutz. Speaking of Amkreutz, he's on the 4th row, 7th, alongside Archie Bowen in 8th place. Rounding out the top 10 then, as we see gathering on the grid here, John McConville, and alongside him, Steve Derrick in that bizarre number 3. And then we see on row 6, 11th place for Tvrtko Sojcic and Alfie Graham in 12th place. Behind them, we have Robert McCoy and Carl Domingo on row 7, 13th and 14th respectively. Then on to the last row here, row 8 for Ruben Thomas. 15th place for the Porsche as we wait to see then gathering on the front of the field. And there we have it with Noah Burkhoff. We are but moments away then from the start of round 2. Not a lot of time to prepare for then, if I do say so myself, watching on board with these drivers. And they will be getting right into the thick of it in just a moment's time, of course. We saw in that last round between Burkhoff and Silf a very fiery start in Sebring. What can they hope to pick up on then here in Le Mans? 90 minutes of racing set to follow, an hour and a half here at the legendary Circuit de la Sarthe. We do see one driver will be starting from the pit lane, so it appears it's Ruben Thomas there, as we see with the Porsche starting in the pit lane. Very bizarre stuff then. Catching back on board then with Noah Burkhoff at the front of the field. David Silf lining up alongside behind them. Cugino and Pasqualini. Simak and Curran on that third row. Keep a close eye on them. It's also worth pointing out, keeping a close eye on some of the new drivers on this field, especially over that 4th row. Completely new lineup with Callum Amkreutz and Archie Bowen, 2 new drivers for this series. Of course, we've seen Archie Bowen before in his exploits with the Euro Titans endurance team over on Assetto Corsa Competizione. We know that he's an avid fan of Le Mans Ultimate, so it's going to be curious to see what he can do today then with the Corvette. We see him there on the 4th row alongside Amkreutz in the Spirit Racing of Le Mans Aston Martin. Well then, we are about to see some potential history in the making then, folks. Watching here with Noah Burkhoff at the front of the field. 14 cars in all, 7 either side of it on track as we make our way down towards the first running of things here at Le Mans. That fated arrival to the front of the field, down through the Ford chicane. Then making their way through the Virage de Raccordement. down towards the line then here at Le Mans, home of the 24 Hours of Le Mans. It is motorsports royalty that gives rise to round 2 of the championship. 90 minutes of racing set to go, and we're green and racing here in Le Mans for the first time here at MSC, and a great start, I must say, there for Noah Burkhoff. Already peels away from David Silf in second place. We see in the background there, Michele Pasqualini takes helm up over Francesco Cugino. We see Michael Simek getting his elbows out on the run in towards Dunlop for the first time here, side by side with Cugino. Now up and ahead, we see from behind Archie Bowen looking to give challenge to the Ferrari. All the meanwhile, we see Jonathan Curran from behind also challenging Cugino. It's a howler of a start then for the Ferrari. Meanwhile as well, taking a look here, Curran v Amkreutz, one consideration. Down through the Dunlop chicane we go. Meanwhile up the order, you can see here Simek v Pasqualini for control of third place through Tetra Rouge for the first time. Almost a little bit of contact there as we make our way onto the Mulsanne straight for the first time here in Le Mans. Watching on board with Michael Simek. Get a look on board here with his fight up against Michele Pasqualini. Straight line speed will be in his court. He's got that side draft off of the Ferrari. So making his way down that first run of the Mulsanne. Now side by side, you can see not the only one looking to do so, making our way down the Mulsanne straight for the first time. It's very nearly, by the scope of it, 3 abreast here with the arrival of Archie Bowen. The Corvette up 1, maybe 2 positions here for the price of 1. Down the Mulsanne, that Corvette is flying. Take a look at this here, on with Archie Bowen. Now gets up and ahead of both Simek and Pasqualini. Speaking of Corvettes as well, take a look down the order there to see fighting between Graham and McCoy. That's for currently the scope of it 11th place. Further up the order, we're seeing here Callum Amkreutz go side by side with John McConville. But let's go quickly back on board with the action up front here. Michael Simek up and ahead of Archie Bowen on the run down towards the Mulsanne corner. We see there peeling out was Pasqualini. So Bowen up to 4th. Simek, as it stands there, in the scope of 3rd. Looking up in front, David Silf has got a serious chance here to challenge up over that of Noah Burkhoff. Taking a look then in the session at large, we have contact there between those two from the onboard cameras of David Silf's Lamborghini. We got a firm inspection there of the diffuser on the back end of Noah Burkhoff's Mercedes. This is absolutely mega stuff here at the Circuit de la Sarthe. Watching with the fight of the race lead, following in unison to them the fight of 3rd place, of which we see Archie Bowen momentarily take the helm of 3rd. Looks for his chances down through Indianapolis and can't find anything in that opening lap. Taking a look in behind, that looked like trouble. That's McCoy. That is, by the looks of it there, Robert McCoy. Yellow flags out. And let's see if we can get a look at that on the replay just to get a scope of what on earth happened. And sadly, by the looks of it, it seems to be showing us something from Sebring. And now we see it refresh, right? So thank goodness we're in the present. Wow, you can see there in the background, sliding into the wall down at Indianapolis was big, big trouble for Robert McCoy. Oh my goodness, we are having a bit of trouble here lag-wise, so I don't think we'll be using the replay system for much longer in this race. You'll have to bear with us here, folks. We are quite confused as to what's going on. You'll have to bear with us here. I think we're having a few issues with the video. We were trialing a few different pieces of equipment on the run in towards this, but clearly that's backfired. So we're not going to be using much more of the current scope of it then for the replay system. That'll be discontinued until further notice. Getting a look back on board then at the front of the field. You may have to bear with us here because this is frankly unacceptable conditions for the frame rate. Yeah, you'll have to give us a moment. We'll be back. Oh, no, never mind. There we go. So we've decided otherwise. So I think it's just a case where if we take a step out of line there with OBS, it is very quick to remind us not to use that replay system. So it seems then for the time being, we're not going to be using the replays on this. And today will serve as somewhat of a polite reminder that we may need to properly spec out the game before we go live next time around. But we see here in the time since, the grid has started to spread out just a little bit on the run through Tetra Rouge. That is very frustrating indeed. As we see here with Pasqualini hunting down position over Cugino and Bowen. Now these two side by side on the second part of the Mulsanne. We see emerging from behind them Michele Pasqualini with Lamborghini making their way down the Mulsanne straight. Down on the run in towards Mulsanne corner. It's contact between Pasqualini and Bowen, and up off a full four wheels goes the Lamborghini. Huge incident there between the pair. We need no replays. We got a full view of what just happened there between the pair down through the Mulsanne corner, and that has gone horrifically wrong. We can see, having pulled to one side, Archie Bowen, and is retired to the pit lane, acutely aware of the possible wrongdoings there. Back into green flag conditions. We see for Pasqualini, it does appear to be significant damages here. Trying to catch on board with the inside view. You can see steering system completely compromised there on Pasqualini's Lambo. So that is very likely the end of the road for them at this time here at Le Mans. So Noah Burkhoff leads ahead of David Silf in second, Mikhail Simek in third, with Cugino fourth. We see behind, looks to be close fighting here. Callum Amkreutz versus Tvrtko Sojcic. This is for fifth place between the pair here. Watching from the point of view of Callum Amkreutz. You see that smoke up in front, and that's Cugino right across the nose of our drivers there, as that very nearly got ugly, but it has invited in Jonathan Curran to come swinging high around the outside. Makes contact, though, with Sojcic, and into the gravel goes Jonathan Curran. It is disaster here in Le Mans. We see there, Jonathan Curran, yellow flags out for the Porsche. Number 001 is out of this race. Or so we're led to believe. If he can get the car going, he may very well still have a fight here. We already see one DNF in this race. Archie Bowen having retired after his incident with Michele Pasqualini. So back into green flag conditions we go then with Jonathan Curran. He's back into the fight with Porsche. Looking back into our other fights on once again with Tvrtko Sojcic. Going up against both McLarens, McConville and Graham. Graham ahead of McConville on a run down towards Dunlop. Up in front of them, Callum Amkreutz. We said keep an eye out for the Aston Martin because he slipped his way through to the top five. Up in fourth place then for Amkreutz, as we see here, three-way split for a fight of fifth place. Leading that charge, the Lexus of Tvrtko Sojcic. Fighting off Alfie Graham and John McConville. One driver also to have snuck his way through. You can see just hanging around in the background the white and red BMW of Carl Domingo. As we exit Tetra Rouge, we do see better run of things here for Alfie Graham. Now gets up and ahead of Tvrtko Sojcic, but is that going to fall away from him as we make our way onto the Mulsanne? So getting on board then with the Lexus as we bring up the HUD from on board Tvrtko Sojcic's point of view. You can see right behind him is John McConville up and alongside. So 176 miles an hour as we see here between the pair. 177. Both of them trying to aim to be in the slipstream there. We can see the McLaren of Graham moving over to give slipstream over to, by the looks of it there, McConville. We're trying to block off both of them. What he's accidentally doing is giving both of them some side draft. So I think we're about to see it possible. Now, as we see them moving over to the left, I was about to say we could see a possible Hakkinen and Schumacher move here down the Mulsanne. Similar to their move over Heinz-Harald Frentzen on the Kemmel Straight, the Belgian Grand Prix, way back when in the history of Formula One. See for McConville, though, up and ahead of Tvrtko Sojcic. That Lexus caught firmly in the middle. But bear in mind, although they're pushing and shoving, is inviting in Steve Derrick to come and have a go here. Meanwhile, Alfie Graham sizes his chances. We see there, Steve Derrick goes flying off track into the gravel on the exit of Mulsanne. Back on, rejoins just behind there, Carl Domingo, who makes his way into ninth place with BMW. In the background, you see there Robert McCoy with Corvette. Meanwhile, John McConville up and ahead of Tvrtko Sojcic. Meanwhile, that top four is now starting to simmer out. Callum Amkreutz fourth, Mikhail Simek in third, David Silf in second, and Noah Burkhoff in the lead by 4.1 seconds. This ongoing fight then between these two has been electrifying to watch as we see making their way up the inside there is Alfie Graham on Tvrtko Sojcic at Indianapolis, but couldn't find any ground of it over the Lexus. In the background, we see a huge wad of smoke being kicked up. Bear in mind, in the pit lane at the moment is Michele Pasqualini. So Ruben Thomas is looking to go up a position to 13th place. Watching here with this 3-car split. Now it's worth pointing out behind them we have Cugino versus Domingo. BMW and Ferrari head-to-head. But going back on board here with Sojcic v McConville. Down towards the Porsche curves. It's Sojcic up the inside on McConville. In through to the Porsche curves we go. We do have a yellow flag out. A car moving slow. It's Cugino in trouble there. Down just at the start of the Porsche curves. Soon to approach him, we see is Jonathan Curran just making his way into this section now as we speak. Going back on board then with the fighting behind Callum Amkreutz. It's Tvrtko Sojcic versus McConville versus Graham. Meanwhile, Domingo up and ahead of Steve Derrick because of that incident with Cugino, now up in 8th place. Watching here from McConville's point of view. Now, he's closer to Graham than he is to Sojcic at this time, so it could be a civil war among the McLarens making their way in towards turn 1. So you see then down the Mulsanne straight, things start to equalise as now tucking back into that slipstream. Over Sojcic is McConville. The man caught in the middle here, rocking a hard place for the McLaren. Further behind, we see Steve Derrick possibly to fight with Carl Domingo at this time. Now taking a look at that gap to each other, away from just the gap to the leader. We see things go to a head here between McConville and Sojcic. Down towards Mulsanne curve we go. Not long from now, and the McLaren finally gets the leg up over that of Tvrtko Sojcic. And meanwhile, we see as well Steve Derrick go up and ahead of Carl Domingo. As for Alfie Graham, he looks to size his chances up over not only Tvrtko Sojcic, but he might just have the momentum necessary to carry this one into a possible lunge at 5th place over John McConville. Making our way then into Mulsanne. This is going to get interesting, as we've already seen this to be a heavy action spot for our drivers thus far. Through we go with dust in their eyes, courtesy of Callum Amkreutz with Aston Martin. We see John McConville now in the lead of that 5th place fight, but right behind him is Alfie Graham and Tvrtko Sojcic. Looking to go on board then, we see here from the point of view, this is on with Alfie Graham at this time. We see near enough pushing that of McConville out of his way. Things getting very dicey here in Le Mans. Up to 5th place goes Graham in towards Indianapolis. Can he hold on to it? Looking up the inside from behind there, we see is Sojcic over McConville. This fight has thus far been exhilarating to watch here for the scope of 5th place between these three. 2 McLarens and a Lexus, all V8 Thunder head to head. Bear in mind that feeding off of each other's slipstream is starting to help them in the long run, because it's worth pointing out the gap between Graham and Amkreutz is only 2.7 seconds. We see, though, as they get onto the straightaways, the Aston Martin up in front. We see here with the number 10 down through the Porsche curves. On the straightaway sections, that Aston actually was, dare I say, pulling away. So for the number 10, he might be able to keep that in the back pocket over the McLarens. Right now, they've got bigger fish to fry. And for Alfie Graham, he's at the front of this 3-car pack for 5th place. Making his way then down towards the Maison Blanche. Bear in mind, we are expectant rain in this race. Much later on, of course, as we start things off in nice and dry conditions at Le Mans. You do have a yellow flag, and it's for Cugino again, and now he's without his rear wing, so the yellow flags are out. Down at what I believe here is the Porsche curves, but this could very well be the end of the road for Francesco Cugino. That is critical damage on the Ferrari. Getting a look in here. Can he get the car up and running is the real question. So we see that's what's left of his rear wing you see there, but I believe he might actually be stuck in that gravel to get the car going. We can see the wheels turning. The car is struggling there. He's trying to get the car fired up. You can hear it. You can hear the engine. I believe he may very well be stuck, or his gearbox may be shattered from the impact. You can see the tyre marks. He's gone in at that wall with quite some speed, and he's currently stuck down in that section. We'll catch back on board with them later on. We're back in the green flag conditions for the rest of the field, and catching back on board with Sojcic, Graham and McConville in this epic fight then for 5th place. We see with the Lexus right now side by side with Alfie Graham on our run down the Mulsanne. John McConville feeding off the pair of them for that slipstream, and now it makes it 3 abreast on the run down the Mulsanne. A formation flight then of the McLarens. Bear in mind in that background there we see Steve Derrick is gaining ground on them, only 2 seconds away from this fight as it stands. And just after the first 15 minutes of things here, we see Noah Burkhoff in the lead, David Silf second, Mikhail Sibek in third, Callum Amkreutz in fourth. We see though up for grabs here, McConville, Sojcic and Graham all fighting for 5th place. Steve Derrick in 8th, Carl Domingo 9th. And Jonathan Curran in that top 10. Presently then, we're on with McConville, who now leads this fight. It is rather confusing, the visuals. We see the identical United Autosports McLaren of Alfie Graham was sizing his chances at the Mulsanne curve to try and have a go here on McConville. He's left himself open to an advance here by Tvrtko Sojcic with Lexus getting a look on board with the number 87. That's near enough bump drafting almost with the 23. The moment he tucks out of that slipstream, you can see where the straight line speed starts to dip for him. So making our way down towards Indianapolis as Alfie Graham looks to size up a charge here on John McConville. Can he commit to it though is the real question. Down through Indianapolis we go in this 3-car split for 5th. So you see then entering the Porsche curves. Sojcic loses a bit of ground here. Meanwhile, Cugino is, as it stands, still at standstill. Now, just getting a quick look in with the 21. We can see that things have not gotten much better there for the Ferrari. For Francesco Cugino, this could very well be the end of his race here in round 2. Of course, we saw the start of this incident for him, or the starting aftermath of this incident. He's now been able to find himself in a different area of the track. I believe this to be actually here down at the Ford curves just before the run into the pits. As we see there, approaching from behind, is the fight between the 2 McLarens of McConville, Graham, and the Lexus of Sojcic. It is absolutely worth pointing out here after 20 minutes of racing, Steve Derrick is starting to wind these 3 in, so it could be 4's company. Now, last interval we saw was 2 seconds. As you've seen there on the left-hand side, that has quickly crawled down by half a second to 1.5 seconds between Sojcic and Derrick. So, trying to put the pressure back onto the McLarens here. Tvrtko Sojcic may overexert himself and leave himself open to a move by Steve Derrick. Making our way then out through Tetra Rouge. On with the Ferrari then of Steve Derrick. 1 second between himself and Tvrtko Sojcic in front. It's worth pointing out half that distance is between Sojcic and Graham. So we'll quickly be catching on board in a moment's time here onto the Mulsanne between Sojcic and Graham. We see here from the point of view of the Lexus, about 0.5 of a second, as John McConville has put 1.5 seconds up over Alfie Graham. So very healthy gap between the two McLarens. It is more a game here for 6th place as McConville secures 5th. Looking back on here with Steve Derrick, 181 miles an hour. Hovering just above there, 7,000 RPM. And closing in into the slipstream now. You can see it climb. 182, 183. Could it be 184 by the time he gets up and alongside the Lexus on a run down through the second part of the Mulsanne Straight, just up through the Curb de Hunaudière. I still have no idea how to pronounce that. Hunaudière. No idea. In towards the Mulsanne corner. So we see having cleared up and ahead then of Tvrtko Stojcic, the worst case scenario for the Lexus as he now tucks in behind the Ferrari. In through to Arnage. On the run in then towards the Porsche curves, we see for Stojcic, he has really picked things back up over his fight with Steve Derrick, so much so that he's looked up the inside immediately as we start. But could he be setting himself up for a switchback here on with Steve Derrick with the Ferrari? So bear in mind, maneuverability will be on his side here by nature of being in the mid-engine car. Up through the karting S's on the run towards the Maison Blanche. One of the hopes here for Steve Derrick. Now, bear in mind, with that wet weather looming in the distance on today's race, the drivers will have to consider at least one pit stop. Now, while there are no mandatory pit stops as per regulations for today's race, that is not to say that we will not see any at all. We can see the skies look to be clear, but the weather radars did give us the indication in the next hour we would be seeing wet weather conditions here at the Circuit de la Sarthe. Well, in the time since, we've seen Steve Derrick drop 1.3 seconds away from Tvrtko Stojcic. So that third sector came alive there for the Lexus. Now moving back up into 7th and re-engaging on his charge up towards that of Alfie Graham. See, rocketing through Tetra Rouge there with Graham. Stojcic in pursuit. 0.7 of a second between the pair, so it is worth pointing out we are looking at that fight of 6th place as it stands. 0.75 of a second as we enter the Mulsanne Straight. But with that Lexus in the slipstream, he's just going to slowly reel him in over the next 3.7 miles. So you can see the physical gap between those two as it stands there. Now up to 0.9 of a second. It's as we hit top gear where things are going to start to possibly change here for Tvrtko Stojcic. But as you can see, he is hemorrhaging time, more so than I think he imagined he would, struggling to get up into that top gear. And now we start to see it come back in. Now as we've hit 6th gear for these cars, you can see just how quickly that's coming back into his favour through the Curb de Hunaudière. It's also worth pointing out from behind here, the rocket ship that is the number 3 Ferrari of Steve Derrick has half a second and closing here on that of Tvrtko Stojcic. So making our way in through to the Mulsanne corner, making our way then down towards the Curb de Golf. On the run towards Indianapolis, this is where the Ferrari could stand to pick things back up. Just reeling in the Lexus. You can see the sky has started to mist up just a little bit there. We lost some of that wonderful azure colors as now we start to see moisture building in the air. We're starting to possibly see the formation of clouds in the region, and that's a harbinger for the wet weather we're set to see later on today. The last fleeting moments of proper clear sunny skies then here at Le Mans starting to run away. Watching up in front, we can see that in the time since through Indianapolis and Arnage, Graham being intercepted by Sojcic. Those two McLarens, they've been terrorized by Lexus all race long here at Le Mans. As you see, Sojcic looking possibly for around the outside on the Curve de Buisson. And on the run in towards the Porsche curves, it's contact there between the 87 and the 23. Running off into the grass goes Alfie Graham. Big trouble then for McLaren. Sadly, we're unable to use the replay system, as I'm sure you just saw earlier on. When we did use that, the entire system just had a huge, like, I don't even know how to describe it, probably a panic attack, I suppose. Very nearly shut itself off. Not entirely sure what's going on there, so we'll be looking into that over the course of the next couple of weeks, next couple of months, to whenever we next get to go on for racing here on Le Mans Ultimate. Still heavily experimental system. So you see there for Sojcic, that third sector once again. I mean, this is absolute magic for the Lexus. This is something he's been able to do rather routinely in today's race. That 87 really comes alive down through sector 3 over the McLarens. He's had the upper hand over Graham and McConville through that sector on a routine basis. As for Alfie Graham, Steve Derrick could be his next adversary here. That Ferrari, we've just seen how formidable in the straightaways that has been over the course of this race, and now with a new target in sight, only a second away, Steve Derrick could have his work cut out for him here for a fight of 7th. These are still amongst the closest fights we have on track here, coming to the end of the first 30 minutes of racing here at Le Mans. A bit of a troubled start to the stream, and then a bit of a troubled start to the race for some. So we'll stay on board here with the Ferrari, with Steve Derrick. Now this is going to be a curious one to watch. We'll stay on board and give you the full telemetry as well from the 296 number 3. As you can see, 178, so ignore where it says kilometers an hour there. We did check over that. That's miles an hour it's showing, not kilometers an hour. So it feeds off of local game data, and we have it set to the Imperial system. So it's 181 miles per hour we're seeing down the Mulsanne. 0.7 of a second and dropping here. You can start to see at the bottom of your screens the gap coming down, and right in front of you, that McLaren becoming a more prevalent sight over the front bumper then of Steve Derrick in the number 3. Heading in towards Mulsanne curve. It's also worth pointing out the gap between Graham and Sojcic has come down quite a fair distance here. 182 miles an hour just before we lift off the throttle onto the brakes there. We can see a bit of cadence braking actually there from Steve Derrick down through the run of the Mulsanne corner, down the curve to Golf. Down through to Indianapolis, taking things nice and easy there on the Ferrari, not trying too hard to overexert himself, knowing he has to make these tyres last, knowing the conditions that are coming. You can see the sky looking a little bit sadder than when we last saw it. It was nice blue skies only a lap or two ago here at Le Mans, and now you can see more distinctive shades of grey appearing. So failing to capitalize in that middle sector then for Steve Derrick in a car that has otherwise shown great prowess in the straightaways. This could be the signs of early struggle then for Ferrari. Looking on board with Alfie Graham, it's 1.5 seconds between himself and Tvrtko Sojcic, but we know already just how active the Lexus can be in that third sector. Despite its antiquated design, this car really comes alive down through sector 3. So then after 30 minutes of racing, getting a look at where it stands at the moment, it's Noah Burkhoff in the lead ahead of David Silf by nearly 16 seconds. Mikhail Simek in third with Callum Amkreutz in fourth. John McConville in fifth. Vertko Sojcic that we're on board with at the moment in sixth ahead of Alfie Graham behind him in seventh. Steve Derrick in eighth. Carl Domingo ninth and Jonathan Curran in the top 10. Further behind them, Robert McCoy in 11th with Michele Pascalini in 12th. Francesco Cugino with heavy damages is down in 13th place. Ruben Thomas in 14th. Archie Bowen, our first and currently only DNF in today's race. So 59 minutes left to go here at Le Mans. We're still on board with Vertko Sojcic on the exit of the Dunlop chicane. Heading up towards Tetra Rouge. 2.5 seconds from McConville. And in the time since we took a reading there of the standings, Noah Burkhoff has opened the gap up over David Silf by an additional 0.8 of a second to what was the scope just briefly there of 16.7 seconds. The closest spread of gaps then we're seeing here are on that run from, looking at it here, 5th down towards the scope of it there at 8th. You can see there John McConville, then Vertko Sojcic, then Alfie Graham, and then just tucked in behind them there is Steve Derrick. Looking on board with the race leader, this is Noah Burkhoff, and we've seen so far for him his best lap of the session so far since the race started, 3:43.571. We've seen from the Mercedes, it has been an ultra confident performance by him so far in this race. We see there chiming in chat, Texas F1, otherwise Stefan Nikolai, who we've seen in a few other series, saying starting it in P1 at Le Mans might not be ideal. To be fair, I mean, au contraire, take a look at the performance here by Noah Burkhoff. Started from pole, had a brilliant getaway from Silf, and has been able to open the gap up here to what is now the scope of 17.1 seconds over the course of just over half an hour. Credit where credit's due there. Not many drivers, I think, can do something like that here at the Circuit de la Sarthe. Look no further than Noah Burkhoff in this series. We are going to be very curious to see how things unfold further down the line as we continue to explore avenues here on Le Mans Ultimate. Bear in mind, we've not got to see yet here on TRTN what we're really here for on Le Mans Ultimate. Of course, I'm sure it's what everyone is rather curious to see. The hypercars. We've still yet to find them, but that is coming. We know that that's coming. But of course, with today, we have learned a few valuable lessons in terms of the stability. There's definitely a lot that needs to be looked into. This is not the same story as what we have on Xbox, where that's doing a lot of the rendering for the game, and this is just doing the rendering for the live stream. So it's not a shared load here. This is the PC doing 100% of the work for us here in terms of rendering. Yellow flags out. It's for Callum Amkreutz with Aston Martin. He's off in the gravel just at the Porsche curves. Now, we saw this earlier on in the session that this was going to be some trouble for Amkreutz. He drops in behind Graham. Steve Derrick could have a chance here over the Aston. We see him go up and around the outside there. Carl Domingo not too far off his trails as he enters the Porsche curves. Could be looking at a potential opportunity here to overtake the Aston. We see him down through the karting S's, on with Domingo at this time with the BMW. Onto the Maison Blanche. We see the Aston Martin. What happened there? That was a bit confusing for that of Callum Amkreutz. I think he just moved over to the side of the road, but is having a few stuttering issues there, as we see in the Spirit Racing of Le Mans Vantage. And is he crabbing there, I believe? That could very well be damage for the Aston. Yes, he is absolutely crabbing. That's a mixture of a little bit of desync, but majoritively crabbing in the Aston. Getting a look on with him, as it does definitely seem apparent here. Yeah, you can see he's crabbing as he enters the pit lane then. Callum Amkreutz drops out of the top 10 behind Jonathan Curran, and soon to be joined then by Michele Pascalini. Currently on their way down towards, by looks of it here, the Porsche curves. They'll be in the pits for some time. Noah Burkhoff in the lead. David Silf in second place. Now, when we take a look back through the results out of round one, this is going to be redemption day here for Silf if he can hold his ground in the next 54 minutes. But we can start to see there, actually, if we go on board, that, you can see the little spits of rain on the Mulsanne. That is the start of wet weather conditions here at Le Mans, and that is only going to continue to pick up over the next 54.5 minutes here in round two of the championship. This is the worst case scenario because, of course, the conditions on track can dramatically change over the course of a single lap here at Le Mans, so drivers really do have to play a bit of a gamble on whether or not they come into the pits early for those wet tyres. We see that McCoy is now the second DNF in this session. That's both Corvettes out here at Le Mans. Presently, then, we've still yet to see a Corvette finish a race here. Looking further behind, we see Michael Simek in third place. So Aston Martin were very early victims there, caught out by the ingress of wet weather. And watching on board here, very hard to see from the external camera, so we often have to go on board with the drivers to get a scope of what it is they're looking at. And taking a look here, this is with the driver's eye view of things, so we get a bit more of an accurate perspective on what they're seeing as they lap around the track here. You can see in the case for Michael Simek, presently, that rain shows no signs of going away, and the weather is only going to continue to pick up. Now, we had a very early look at the weather before the run of round two of the championship, and what we were told is that the weather is here to stay for the remaining 52 minutes of racing. Now, don't hold us to that. This isn't as accurate a system we're working up against as we had over on Assetto Corsa Competizione when we had mixed conditions there. A lot of this is being learned for us in real time. See for Simek, still looking at a very solid result indeed. Nothing to scoff at. If he's able to finish where he is here, that's consecutive third place finishes. That's going to give him currently the scope of about 30 points heading in to round three, where we'll sadly not be alongside with you for the remainder of the season. Now, of course, we were approached on the trailing end of the run-up towards this round by the folks over at MSC that were very curious to know whether or not we'd be interested in covering more things to do with LMU. To put pen to paper on the answer, and the same thing we told them there, we would certainly like to. And I think it's a case where having a very early taste of what things are like here on LMU, we're a big fan of the systems in terms of the camera controls, in terms of the stream integration. What you're actually seeing there on those graphics, it's a built-in plugin that the folks that developed this game made for specific use in OBS. So this has been a real hands-on experience compared to what we've had over on ACC, where we're a lot more reliant on the game itself to give us the information we want. Now we can tailor that to an appropriate viewing experience without having to overcomplicate things. We know already how fragile things can be on OBS, as you've also experienced today. We see in the pit lane at the moment is Tvrtko Stojcic and Carl Domingo. So possible tyre swaps kicking off here. Also joining them in the paddock, we see is Jonathan Curran. So back on that topic here, as we see the drivers into the pit lane. And now it is definitely a case where we want to continue to cover content here on LMU, but it's a case right now that we just don't have the time, given where I am as an individual. And I'm not going to go into the details on that because that's private to me, but obviously real life commitments would stand in the way of this, and quite a full plate for me coming up in the next couple of months, so we need those gaps on the calendar clear. However, the next opportunity we're presented to cover for LMU, it is definitely an option we're interested in exploring. So make no mistake of that, you will see LMU on TRTN at some point later on this year, just not as soon as round 3 of this championship. Of course, that Wednesday evening slot that we're streaming for at the moment will be taken up by the folks over at VSR for coverage of Season 11. We'll kick off with them next Wednesday for the opening round of the season. It's going to be very exciting to see what things are like for Season 11. Of course, trailing off of White Doctor's second championship after his first in Season 8. Looking to go into title defense mode then as he skipped out through Season 9 and the Porsche Cup era. We'll be very curious to see how things pick up when we get back on with those folks next Wednesday. As we look around then with the field, waiting for our next major moves into the pits. We see here with David Silf dancing in the rain on his way towards the Porsche curves. Now, we watch on board with the Lamborghini because... Actually, no, sorry, not to the Porsche curves, into Indianapolis. We watch on with the Lamborghini because this is a car that's been of quite high interest to us here on TRTN. Very limited appearances over on ACC. And we see here for David Silf, a car we've never really seen this driver in before. We've seen Silf in with McLaren. We've seen Silf in, I believe, with BMW at one point. And we've seen Silf in with Mercedes. Very rarely would there be the considerations with the knowledge we had before this championship that we'd see Silf once again, but in with Lamborghini. Moreover, we know stability to be a concern with the Huracan, so as the wet weather continues to preside over the Circuit de la Sarthe, it's going to make for curious viewing here with the 443. Bear in mind, about 18.5 seconds up the road from him is Noah Burkhoff. Now, we'll be curious to see, yes and no, actually. We thought maybe coming into the pits was the Mercedes, actually just hooked onto that pit entry line to give himself a better run through the Ford chicane. So we'll watch here with Silf over whether or not there's the likelihood he'll be moving up into the pit lane. Can see then for the drivers having moved on to the wet weather tyres, Sojcic, Domingo, Curran and Amkreutz, as well as Cugino. The rest of the drivers currently on the mediums. In terms of most positions gained, you'd be looking over at Alfie Graham with McLaren, up 7 positions to 5th. Meanwhile, we do see Mikael Simek is into the pit lanes here. Following them in, perhaps. Yes, we do see the arrival there. John McConville with McLaren. And the same story there in which applies, so it appears here, for Alfie Graham. Steve Derrick, we'll see, is also coming into the pit. So we are seeing this exodus from the track into the pits here to take refuge in the wet weather to put some brand new wet tyres on. As it stands, that leading pair could be leaving things a little too late then. So you see both McLarens are in. Mikael Simek will be coming out in a moment's time then with the Ferrari. Also joining us in the paddock is Steve Derrick. We've yet to see anything here from Tvrtko Sojcic. Of course, came in a little earlier on for those wet weather tyres. So now is making up ground on his run in towards, as it stands here, the Porsche curves, the number 87, as the wet weather we can actually start to see here on the external cameras becoming a more prevalent sight, as it's becoming harder and harder to make out the image of the car as the weather continues. Out through the Maison Blanche. Through here. It could be 3 positions up for grabs. Now he's hunting down both of those McLarens as well as the Ferrari of Steve Derrick. So we'll see if he's successful on that. In through the Ford curve he goes. We do see Simek is out for 3rd. McConville on the exit of the pit lane. Bear in mind, Tvrtko Sojcic is not too far away. Alfie Graham looks liable to lose that position out. So you see then Sojcic up to 5th. Sojcic only 3.3 seconds. Bear in mind, already having bed in his wet tyres. McConville on fresh wet tyres on a way down through the Dunlop chicane in towards Tetra Rouge. Looks like, oh, that's trouble for Jonathan Curran. What's gone on here then for the Porsche? This was just on the exit of the last corner here, the Virage de Recordement, as he very nearly made heavy contact with the pit wall. He's back out on the run down through the Dunlop curve. Very confusing turn of events there for Jonathan Curran. Currently in the pits then, we see is Ruben Thomas with Porsche. As it stands, no sign that he's coming back out. We do see there Jonathan Curran is now a confirmed DNF, so he's withdrawn that number 1 from competition here. Very curious case then for Jonathan Curran. Looking on then with McConville and Simek. These two, as it stands then, upwards of 21 seconds apart. One of our major focal points will be going on behind him with Tvrtko Sojcic possibly to try and gain ground here. But as we head past the halfway mark, let's take a look at the results so far. Looking onto that top 10, Noah Burkhoff still leads yet, having not come into the pits as it stands. Actually, as I say that, Noah Burkhoff is in the pit, so we'll wait to see if David Silf is liable to follow him here. And we do see both of the race leaders are in. So Burkhoff currently leads ahead of Silf with Simek in 3rd. And then further behind, McConville 4th, Sojcic in 5th, Graham in 6th, Derek 7th, Domingo 8th, Amkreutz in 9th, and Pascalini rounds out the top 10. Further behind then, we see it's somewhat of a death toll here. Cugino in 11th, Thomas in 12th, but currently no indication looking into the paddock there. You can actually see in the center of your screens behind the results, that is Ruben Thomas, and no idea if he's coming out from the pit lane. Meanwhile, 3 DNFs, Curran, McCoy and Bowen in the session so far. Oh, then looking back in, this is with David Silf, as we see here with the Lamborghini. It's a race against time in the paddocks. We do hear there, that's the sound of the Mercedes. We just saw Noah Burkhoff blast away from his pit box, now down to the exit of the pit lane. David Silf, as it stands, still yet to have been released off the jacks, I believe is about to come down here. So we'll wait to see from the Lamborghini, as bear in mind, Mikhail Simek is only about 26 seconds out and closing fast. We see that dropping off the jacks. There goes David Silf out of the pit lane. 43 minutes then left to go here in Le Mans. Burkhoff still in the lead, a successful overcut then by the Mercedes in the lead of this race, looking for consecutive victories in the opening rounds of Season 1's LMU GT3 Championship. Mikhail Simek, you can see that he has drawn the gap in rather close now to Silf. As it stands there, about 2.4 seconds, the 443 down through to Dunlop. Right behind him, we see there the approach of Mikhail Simek. So we're going to stay on board with these two as we could have a potential 1v1 here. 2.2 seconds as we make our way in towards the Dunlop chicane. You can see there, just entering the chicane up in front. That's David Silf. Now, if we're talking about battles as well, we may want to redirect our attention here to Tvrtko Sojcic versus John McConville through the curb to Dunlop into the opening section of the track here. The Dunlop chicane. Now in through to the Tetra Rouge S's, and then the Virage du Tetra Rouge coming up just around the corner. Running out wide there, McConville, but also following in his midst a bit of a snap on for the Lexus of Tvrtko Sojcic. We'll stay on board with these two as the closest fight on track. Observing that gap very closely at the bottom of our screens and observing the physical gap between them on track here down the Mulsanne straight in worsening conditions here in Le Mans. As you see here, 1.3 seconds. Now, I think we're about to find here where that Lexus is finding a bit more steam. And that this is as we make our way through that kink to the right here, just after what would be the second chicane on the Mulsanne straight, the Curb de Honardière. It's through here where we see the gap normally start to drop down. As it stands, though, that perhaps difference in strategy is coming by the wayside here for Sojcic. Looking back out on track, we did have a momentary yellow flag. I'm curious to know as to who that was for. As it stands, no answer yet. Making our way. Oh, hang on a tick there. I think we may find out who our next yellow flag could be. Tvrtko Sojcic way out wide out the Mulsanne corner. That brings about the end of his fight there with John McConville. We see for Alfie Graham, he could be gaining some distance up over the Lexus because of that blunder. To make our way through the curb to Golf, down towards Indianapolis. Indianapolis and Arnage here for Mikhail Simek. Currently in 3rd. And 7.9, now 8 seconds away from David Silf on the same stretch of the track here on their run down through the Curb de Buisson into the Porsche curves. 40 minutes left to go then here in Le Mans. So far, it looks to be very likely the case here for a possible extra race win for Noah Burkhoff. For David Silf, it's redemption from how things turned out in the trailing end of round 1 in Sebring. Quickly observing the gap between McConville and Sojcic. It's worth pointing out because we do have yellow flags. It's for Steve Derrick on the exit of Arnage by the looks of it there. So we see Carl Domingo down through the Virage d'Arnage, going up and ahead of Steve Derrick. It looked to be a little bit of a fender bender there with the crash barriers, but nothing too severe for the Ferrari. He's back out on track, but now down to 8th place. Now, back on board with Sojcic v McConville. It's worth pointing this out because of the pressing factor that third sector is just so advantageous for the Lexus. We've seen Sojcic at his most confident in this race through Sector 3. One thing that is confusing to me, Michal Simek is in the pit lane. And for what reason there? He's up on his jacks. He's going to drop away from the podium. We see, again, another yellow flag, this time out for the Aston Martin. Once again, this is Callum Amkreutz in the Spirit Racing of Le Mans number 10. He's caught there just in the gravel trap. The question is, can he get going? This is just before the S's at Tetra Rouge in Sector 1. So it appears that doesn't seem likely the case. So there is that persistent yellow flag out through Sector 1. We're going to go and catch back on board here with 2 drivers making their way out through this section here. This is Tvrtko Sojcic and John McConville. These two separate by just around 2.1 seconds to each other just before the Virage de Tetra Rouge. Amkreutz now out of this race officially. A painful end then for Aston Martin. Wet weather, that's the straw that broke the camel's back here. And I am rather perplexed as to what was the decision making behind Michal Simek's second visit to the pit lane. As now we see here the Czech talent having dropped down as 6th. He was on for a surefire podium and consecutive podium finishes with 37.5 minutes to go. He exits Tetra Rouge onto the Mulsanne and still not entirely sure what the thought process was behind that second run. I don't believe it was at least on his own volition to come back into the pit lane. I'm sure had this worked the first time around, he wouldn't have found his way back in here. Looking then with Sojcic, 2.7 seconds away from McConville up in front. They're on the same stretch here of the Mulsanne. Taking a look up in front, here's the McLaren. United Autosports, number 95, I believe, there on his run down towards the end of the Mulsanne straight. We see here from the point of view of John McConville, can start to see that the conditions for weather are worsening by the second here. You can see it on that run down through Mulsanne corner. So little grip to be found here for the drivers. And it's worth taking note of the fact we do have, by looks of it here, another yellow flag. Now, that did come out for just a brief moment. I am curious to know who that was for. We got to look on board here. This is with Silf, forwards trouble for David Silf, and it was the yellow flags for the first time for the Lamborghini. He's without his wing. Where is his rear wing gone? So that first issue that we saw for the yellow flag, where's his wheel? Where is his front right? What the? Where is his front right? Oh my words. How was that the elephant in the room we didn't address? What? Where is his front? Oh my goodness, I've never seen a car in such disrepair, but by God, he's going for it. He's got his front right. It's completely gone. He's riding on the bodywork, on the front bumper of his Lamborghini. What on earth has gone on here for David Silf? It is critical damage on his run towards the Porsche curves. It can't stay in the straight and narrow. It's into the gravel for David Silf. John McConville looks sizing up then for a chance of second place up over David Silf in that critically wounded Lamborghini. Tvrtko Sojcic moves up onto the podium. Alfie Graham could move up to 4th here as we see David Silf is determined against all odds here to make his way to the pit lane. But as we exit the karting S's, could this be the nail in the coffin for the 443? We see there he's holding the emergency road. He does not want to step in anyone else's way here, unless he absolutely has to. Mikhail Simek, another driver we sort of have some trouble that would bring him to the pit lane, will be seeing his way back to the top 5. But at what cost here? David Silf, we saw brought out that first yellow flag down in Sector 2 as we caught on with him. We were looking on board with the Lamborghini, so we were not able to see why he had run off so wide at Arnage, but what a shock to the system there. His front right tyre and its wheel along with it are completely gone away from the car, and somehow, with 3 wheels back to the pit lane, comes David Silf. I mean, even if he doesn't take a top 10 finish in this race, bravo for being able to make your way through a wet Le Mans with no rear wing and 3 wheels, and still make it back to the pit lane. Whatever happens from here on out is irrelevant. A trip like that is proper heroism here from Silf. Carl Domingo will move up then to 6th place with BMW, but I am still absolutely awestruck at what happened there. Yellow flags out momentarily. Curious to know who that was with, just quickly sifting through, and I believe it was here for Cugino, just ran a little bit out wide. Nothing too crazy. Oh, no, we do see as well, it's also at the Porsche curve, so it was 2 incidents at the same time. Ruben Thomas in the first form, number 92 Porsche, in Sector 3 at the moment, having a spot of bother. Those wet conditions are getting worse by the second here. 33 minutes left to go. We've already seen some of the worst damages ever incurred to a GT3 from what we saw from the Lamborghini of Silf. We see Ruben Thomas is struggling against the conditions here, but where's he going? Tried to get onto the throttle, but the cars immediately come into the wall. Yellow flags then out in Sector 3. David Silf has now been confirmed a DNF in this race. The wet weather, the Achilles heel then of this grid. We're down 5 cars, only 10 left here in round 2. And it could be one more here with Ruben Thomas in serious trouble. Back in the green flags on the other end of the track here, on board with the race leader, Noah Burkhoff, with Mercedes AMG. And taking a look then as we drop in towards nearly the last 30 minutes of racing, that yellow flag persists then for Ruben Thomas. Taking a look then, we can see from the back of the field, it's all DNFs there. Silf, Amkreutz, Curran, McCoy and Bowen. They're looking up in that top 10. Burkhoff leads, McConville second, Sojcic third, Graham fourth, Simek fifth, Domingo sixth, Derek seventh, Pascalini eighth, and Cugino in ninth. Ruben Thomas in 10th, but could also be in the scope of another DNF, bringing the tally of drivers here at Le Mans down from 15 at the start to 9 with the last 30 minutes rounding around the corner. It has been nothing short of brutal conditions. Now, I have seen some horrific race ends in my time here as a commentator. When we started off on TRR in the F1 Virtual Series, our F1 2021 Championship ended in such tragic fashion at the Austrian Grand Prix. We weren't even allowed to air it. It ended with 3 drivers. Everyone who survived that race got a podium. And I'm seeing conditions much similar to that play out here in Le Mans. You can see the rooster tailing from Tvrtko Sojcic and up in front of him from John McConville as they kick up tremendous amounts of water into Sector 3. Rightly so there, Texer F1 in chat. No wing, no front right, no problem. I think even in spite of the fact that he's got on to now DNF in this race, with damages like that, you'd not be surprised, but how he was able to pilot that machine back towards the pit lane in such heavy damage. I've seen drivers retire for less, far less, and retire straight to the pit lane. That just isn't Silf's style. He was determined to get back to the paddock. You got to hand it to him there. That's commitment. Even amidst it all, and with that huge spin down through the Porsche curves, he was still looking to get that back home, and that he did. So the closest gap at the moment, 2.8 seconds and dropping. We're on board here with Tvrtko Sojcic, one of those two drivers caught up in the midst of that fight. We do have yellow flags. Hang on, just a tick here. Who was that for? You did momentarily see a very close gap here for Domingo. But that seems to have dropped by the wayside here. Pascalini in 8th place. There was a momentary yellow flag. I believe, looking at it here, that yes, we do have confirmation now. Ruben Thomas has DNF'd from this race. We're down to 9 cars left here in Le Mans. One of the closest fights on track then appears to be Sojcic v McConville, but also playing second fiddle to that, Domingo v Derek. And Carl Domingo has played a very silent game of chess here at Le Mans. He's been able to survive the rest of the grid to put himself in a very respectable 7th place so far. You got to consider when you take a look into the amount of positions gained that in the case of Domingo, he's up 7. Now, that's not the all-time record for this race. That's currently in joint between Sojcic and Graham. Those two having a world-class change in position on this track. As we see right now, one among them for those heavy changes in position has been Domingo. And since this is among the first time we've ever seen here Carl Domingo in the BMW, it has been a mighty impressive debut. Watching with that BMW, just quickly getting a look at the telemetry for him at this time. 175 miles an hour as he makes his way down the Mulsanne Straight. "27.5 minutes left to go then here in Le Mans. That gap between Derek and Domingo has opened up now to 4 seconds. Meanwhile, Sojcic to McConville has dropped beneath 2 seconds. We see here on the run through what looks to be the Porsche curves, if I'm not mistaken. No, as a matter of fact, it's Indianapolis again. Very easy to confuse those two sections, especially when you don't have a track map. But taking a look here, both of them had a bit of trouble down through Indianapolis and Arnage. Bear in mind, the reason why we keep getting the corners wrong here is we actually don't have a map of where the drivers are on track. In order to do that, we have to pull the tower away and show you there on the left-hand side. Even then, I'm squinting when I'm looking at that. As it stands, though, we are now actually into the Porsche curves. You can see, compared to how the race was at the start, how hesitant things are now for Tvrtko Sojcic with Lexus. In an area where he's been so vivid in his drive in the number 87. He is now really tiptoeing around this area of the track and no longer has that advantage on paper against McConville. These two nearly a full minute away from the race leader at this time, Noah Burkhoff, who has had an impeccable drive so far here at Le Mans. 26.5 minutes left to go then before the end of this race here in round 2. And even in spite of that downturn in performance, that has not stopped Sojcic from gaining some ground here on McConville. Watching on with the pair. We could be seeing the precursor to some great fighting here for second place. Much higher stakes than their last battle. You can even see the water starting to collect in the gravel off at turn 1 of the curb to Dunlop. And in through the Dunlop chicane we see here. Heading into the first part of Tetra Rouge then. The Tetra Rouge S's. McConville up in front. We can see here trying to defend away, but that McLaren is getting very, very twitchy in that opening sector, making his way through Tetra Rouge proper now. You can hear it in the note on the engine. He's playing things ultra hesitantly. And that one tiny little degree difference in how much he chose to give the throttle there is what's changing things in this fight for second place. Back on board then with John McConville. Watching in then as we get the heads-up display ready to show that difference in straight line speed between the McLaren and the Lexus as we head down the Mulsanne Straight. We see in the early parts of it here the McLaren's able to take away from the Lexus. but it's as we get towards that second half where Sojcic stands to reel McConville back in. And so it stands. We're proven dead wrong by that McLaren. With the run down the Mulsanne, we really were expecting to see him reel in McConville at this time. But as it turns out there, when you can't find your way into the slipstream, even having 1 or 2 mile an hour over the McLaren on the straightaways is insignificant when you're unable to stay in the slipstream here. That's not stopped these two from still being 1.1 seconds away after the exit of the Mulsanne corner. So out through the curb to Gulf, down towards Indianapolis and Arnage. These two still determined to fight things out for second place. 23 minutes left to go. Now, it's also worth pointing out there is an additional fight here. Oh, never mind. No, sorry, that's in poor taste. We were looking at the data there, and it shows whenever we have two drivers light up on our heads-up display as red on our heads-up display, it shows they are close enough to where this is considered a major fight. Now, grey, like we're seeing here, is fights that are progressing into a major fight. We saw the red come up there, and it was Cugino to Silf, both of which are in the pit lane. Cugino having repaired his Ferrari, Silf out of this race. So that's quite mean from the game there to consider that a battle. You see then through sector 3 down towards the karting S's. Cugino on the way out of the pit lane. Up towards the Maison Blanche. 1.1 seconds, 1.2 now as they make their way through the Maison Blanche. Now, coming up in the Ford chicane here, and the Virage du Recordement, this is the area where we've seen the Lexus build up a lot of that confidence once again for a charge through sector. And we'll see if that is the case here for Sojcic v McConville for second place. 1.2 seconds on exit, that's 1.3, so much better exit there by John McConville to hold now what is 1.6, nearly 1.7 seconds as we make our way through the curb to Dunlop here on the next lap. You see then for these drivers, looking into those tyres, of course, very few surprises to see everyone still remaining on track or on those wet tyres, but they seem to be doing very little in the grand scheme as the cars are still incredibly wiry to control. In terms of number of stops, we have a surprising number of cars having done 2 pit stops. Now, we know for the case of Pasqualini and Cugino as to why that is. Damages was what stepped in the way of their strategy, but Simek is one that definitely does confuse me. We'll be very curious to find out what actually happened for Mikael Simek to bring him into the pits for the second time here. It's ultimately what's compromised on his chances of a podium today. He'll be praying for something to happen up in front between McConville and Sojcic to bring him back into the scope of third, but right now, those chances seem rather unlikely. .8 seconds then currently the gap, and once again it's that early doors confidence and superior technology on the run down the Mulsanne straight. That's what's given McLaren the upper edge here over Lexus. The moment they're caught in the slipstream, there's very little they can do. We do have yellow flags out. It's for Carl Domingo with BMW getting a look in here, trying to get a rough gauge of where he is out on track. Looking in with the BMW. This is, I believe, yes, on the run through Tetra Rouge. So just before Tetra Rouge was on the exit of the S's for Tetra Rouge, where the BMW ran into its spotter bother. And by the looks of it, doesn't appear to have come out of this with damages. We'll take a look on board, though, to see were that such the case. Sadly, well, the BMW's got up some pretty terrible angle when it comes to taking a look at that steering wheel. But from what I could gather, he was pointing it straight. Yeah, that's a straightaway. Meanwhile, McConville-Wysoicic takes another turn here as we're now out nearly 2.5 seconds between the McLaren and the Lexus at the forefront of fighting on the podium. We do see that the yellow flags have come out. Again, it's for Cugino, who now looks to be out of this race. And now we're down at only 8 drivers, nearly half the grid gone here in the wet and wild conditions at the Circuit de la Sarthe. I think possibly the most extreme among them there was David Silf. I mean, we see here with the Lamborghini, and now, of course, repaired from the pit lane, as we see here. But when we last saw him, the front end was completely caved in. That front right for him, that's the left-hand wheel on our cameras there, was completely separate from the cars. And that rear wing as well, clad in the MSA Racing logo, was a decoration of one of the various gravel traps on circuit. It was without really much a line there, but we were still able to get the car back towards the paddock. And ultimately, we'll finish things off here from the pit lane. Definitely not the way he hoped today would end. He was looking at a very confident second place, but as the wet weather sort of slammed in on track here, we did say it before, it was a curious car to watch, that Lamborghini, because stability is a huge concern for it, especially in the wet weather. We saw it in ACC, and now we see the aftermath of said consequence here in LMU. It seems that old habits die hard, and Lamborghini's one of having a very wiry car for wet weather has not faded here in the World Endurance Championship version of the Huracan Evo 2. So then, as we reel in on the last 15 minutes of racing just around the corner, 17.5 left to go, and taking a look at the current running of the session results. Noah Burkhoff in the lead here after 18 laps of racing at the Circuit de la Sarthe in round 2 of the MSC LMU GT3 series. Finds himself up and ahead with the car on screen at the moment. John McConville, second place for McLaren as they head down through the Tetra Rouge S's. Behind them, Tvrtko-Sojcic with Lexus in third place. Alfie Graham in fourth with McLaren. And Mikhail Simek in the top 5. Steve Derrick in 6th with Carl Domingo in 7th. Michele Pasqualini in 8th. And Francesco Cugino starts the wad of DNFs in this race. David Silf rounds out the top 10, also a DNF here at Le Mans. Following in the wave of DNFs, then 11th down through to 15th. Amkreutz, Curran, McCoy, Thomas and Bowen all out of this race here in round 2. See 2 seconds as it stands there on the Mulsanne between McLaren and Lexus. It's worth pointing out as well, just the, again, the enormous amount of rooster tailing being kicked up here. If we go to catch on board with the Lexus, you can see, or I suppose what you can't see there, is McConville's McLaren. The amount of spray being generated has completely obscured the outline of the car. All he can see is the trail of mist being kicked up by the car in front of him. That's the only indication that there is a car out there. You can see there on the left-hand side of the Mulsanne straight is where that dry line has been forming in over the course of this race. The drivers have to stick to this religiously. We have another yellow flag out. And is it? Yes. No, it's not for McConville. So was it for Domingo there? We did see on the speedometers he was running slow, but I believe there is just taking a look at it. Again on the run through Tetra Rouge, and we can see he's running a lot slower than before. Let's go and catch on board here. And it doesn't appear to be damage to the steering system. At least not severely, so we're led to believe here. And we can't see any major damages on the BMW. So it does leave us with many a question here on what's going on here for Carl Domingo. Going back on board then with Sojcic and McConville, two drivers we spent quite a great deal of time with here. Of course, Alfie Graham was part of that fight as well earlier on in this race, but since having dropped 9 seconds behind the Lexus up on the podium, you can just see there off in the background was Alfie Graham, just on the exit of Arnage. This run of things through Sector 3, we're seeing now at its most extreme here, the track glistening with rain. So much standing water on the far edges, so the drivers can barely deviate off of the white lines. They could barely deviate off of the dry line, let alone. So down through Maison Blanche. .2 seconds here between Sojcic and McConville. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but it is worth pointing out they are getting closer and closer to each other as the wet weather conditions continue to worsen. Yellow flags out for Domingo. Again here in trouble. This time, by looks of it, is this out through... I believe this is out through... yes, it's out through Arnage. As we see here, the Curve de Buisson on the run in towards the Porsche curves. There's a bit of trouble there for Domingo. Back on board then with McConville and Sojcic. Now that's out 1.9 seconds. So again, falling into this frustrating stalemate between McLaren and Lexus. No ground seemingly being able to be gained or lost in the long term. These two still held between one another at about arm's length here. Meanwhile, McConville now nearly a full minute out from the leading Mercedes of Noah Burkhoff. We see here on the run through Virage, just after Indianapolis there, 1.4 seconds as we make our way towards Sector 3. Now this is, again, that area of push and pull where we start to see Sojcic pull things in here for McConville's second place spot. And where things have been getting closer and closer each time, when things actually do get, if they do get side by side, where could they expect to find their chances in far worse conditions than their last meeting for position on track? Now, it's also worth pointing out, if we're talking about gaps here, one has definitely started to draw down. That's between Mikhail Simek and Alfie Graham. That's for 4th place on track, having just dropped in for a moment there under the 2-second bracket. Let's go and look on board here with Simek. Currently pursuing Alfie Graham. You can see him just in the foreground there, making his way through the Virage d'Arnage. Big step out there for the McLaren, wrestling the controls. Meanwhile, in contrast as well, still up and ahead and fighting is Sojcic and McConville. They make their way through the karting S's here. Actually, this is through the Porsche curves just before the karting S's. 10 minutes left to go then here in Le Mans. Meanwhile, looking in behind, Simek v Graham. And this could be one to watch. Taking a look in here with these two. Eight-tenths of a second here in Sector 3. Now, we'll be watching two fights for the price of one, as we also see Sojcic is gaining ground up over McConville. But as it appears, is that coming into the pit lane? Yes, it is, for the Lexus. Tvrtko Sojcic comes into the pits with 10 minutes left to go in this race. That's going to give, by the looks of it here, Alfie Graham the scope of third. Not if Michael Simek has anything to say about it. And by the looks of it, that Ferrari absolutely does. He's been pushing absolute hell through that Ferrari to put it in with even a shot of that fight for what is now third place. For Michael Simek, this could be redemption to a podium in the closing 9 minutes at Le Mans. So staying on board with the Ferrari then. Watching from the point of view of Michael Simek. Currently fourth, hunting down the McLaren in front of him. Barely visible beyond the spray. That's Alfie Graham. Now having recently shifted up to third. Tvrtko Sojcic just on his way out. So that was an indicator to us. Sadly, we couldn't see it unless we were to open up the look of things for the overall track map. That would have been, by looks of it, a drive-through penalty having been served by Sojcic. Conversely, that was not, I believe, the same thing to have happened for Simek. You see here, though, Simek v Graham, 8/10 of a second. Now we know just how much of a bullet that Ferrari is on the straightaway. So taking a look here with the telemetry on board with that of Michael Simek. Difference in speed here is only about a few kilometers an hour, 285 to 282. That's 178, 179 miles an hour we're seeing, but now tucking into that slipstream, you can see that gap start to crash down very, very quickly here. So very soon we could be seeing a move for third place for Michael Simek on his way down the Mulsanne straight. Bear in mind, we can start to see there that curve coming up. So we are not far from the exit of this straightaway section, so he has got to think of something and think of it fast. On his way down towards the Mulsanne curve at a moment's time. Could be going up and around the outside here on Alfie Graham. So now going for it as we pull away the telemetry. Up and ahead of Graham in towards the Mulsanne curve goes Michael Simek. Alfie Graham looking at possible chances of a fight back here. Both of them, you can see glowing red brakes on the run down through the Mulsanne curve. Fortunately, no trouble for either of them as they exit down towards the curve to golf. Now it's Alfie Graham on the advantage here, getting a look on board with the McLaren, hunting him down. Michael Simek immediately victim of a counter-attack by McLaren. You can see pushing right up to the rear bumper there, side by side. On the run down towards Indianapolis in a moment's time. This is where it could all come crashing down in their fight upon the podium. We see there subsiding earlier on the brakes. Goes Simek, possibly to have a look at the inside here down at Indianapolis. He does look for it. Ultimately will have his way to the outside at Arnage, unless he can think of something here in his fight with Graham. Alfie Graham holding centre mass of the road down through this section to make things difficult for the Ferrari to get the upper hand. We do see, though, in spite of everything, the Ferrari was poking its way up to the inside for the run down towards the Porsche curve. Now, of course, we have the curve de Buisson here just before Porsche curves. But it appears great defense so far then by Alfie Graham. Michael Simek had him on the straightaways, but in the corners, that McLaren is still able to put up a worthy fight to the Ferrari. Into the Porsche curves we go. Here in Sector 3, you can see that broad difference in cornering capacity off of the Ferrari. We saw him hook all the way out to the left to jump in through the racing line at the Porsche curves, down through to the karting S's we see here in Sector 3. Super close stuff in the last 6 minutes at Le Mans. Heading up and around the karting S's, Michael Simek rubs doors there with Alfie Graham through Maison Blanche. Could there be the scope of extra contact between the pair? They make their way down towards the Ford chicane. They're side by side. The Ferrari later on the brakes. The McLaren still holding on the run in towards the last chicane here at the Virage du Recornement. What is the fight back chances for the 23? We see a difference in line. Ultimately, it's Simek that moves up into third, but then fighting it back. Down the opening straight goes Alfie Graham. We are heading into the final ring of laps in this race, and it is going to be an incredible final foray at Le Mans for round 2 of the championship here on the LMU GT3 series by MSC. In through the Dunlop chicane we go. Simek versus Graham. It has been spectacular stuff here, and what has been a very, very difficult round for many here in round 2. Wet conditions in the first 90-minute race of the season. Meanwhile, into the pits again goes Tvrtko Sojcic. Now, I'm curious to know why that's the case here. Into the pits he goes. He's on his way out. Back on board. Simek versus Graham in through Tetra Rouge. Ultimately, we see here, for Graham's point of view, things are going to be getting tough. You can see right behind him then is the Ferrari. Pushing up to him, very nearly contact. You've got to give it to these drivers here, just how close they're willing to tow things. We know how fast the Ferrari is, but he is now given that free and easy slipstream over to the McLaren. So taking a look here with Alfie Graham. He's just going to be able to hold on for dear life with the onboard. You see here, confident 178 miles an hour. As it stands, he's only a single kilometre an hour behind. And that could still shift on its head, hanging around in the slipstream of that Ferrari. 289, 290. So he is gaining here as he just drops into 6th gear. He is gaining ground on Michael Simek. 185 thousandths, 160 thousandths, 130 thousandths, 100 thousandths, 65 thousandths. They're side by side. Cutting away then from the onboard telemetry back on to the timing charts as side by side goes Graham and Simek on the run down towards the Mulsanne corner. Side by side on the way through Mulsanne, on their way to the Curb de Golf. They're still side by side, only hundredths in between the pair of them. Graham back to 3rd, Simek back to 4th. 2.5 minutes left to go, and I watch between my fingers to see what could happen next in the scope of this fight between McLaren and Ferrari for the last of the podium spots of the remaining survivors of this race today. Watching here on the run towards Indianapolis. This is where it could get ugly between the pair. Better exit there by Simek. Graham, though, has got the inside for Arnage, so Simek's going to have to go the long way around town if he wants to hold on to that position. I think he's opting instead for a later apex, and he's got the run of it out through Arnage. So now tucked in behind goes Alfie Graham. These two having a wonderful dance in the rain here. It's proper ballet stuff between McLaren and Ferrari as they make their way to the Porsche curves. Bear in mind, for the race lead, he's just moved on to the final lap. We see that difference in line. Simek goes long and holds on to 3rd from around the outside. Was able to hold things off away there from Alfie Graham, but all hope is not yet lost for McLaren. All he has to do is stay with that Ferrari by the time they hit Tetra Rouge. Once he's in the slipstream, he can fight this one back. Looking up with the race lead, of course, we're on to that final lap here with Noah Burkhoff. John McConville, 2nd place. Very confident result here for him. His last result was 6th place in Sebring. So this is a huge upgrade for him. White flags fly for him there. We're on to the final lap of racing. From behind, you see as well, that's Michael Simek and Alfie Graham making their way down to the line there. We see, though, in the time since, that gap has opened up to nearly 2 seconds. So for Alfie Graham, he has really got to find a Hail Mary solution for that 3rd place spot. Could it be a McLaren 2-3, or is it just going to be one McLaren on the podium? We do see yellow flags out, and for whom? It's Carl Domingo down through what appears to be here the Virage du Arnage, down in Sector 3. That BMW has found continued struggles here in the trailing end of round 2. We do see the rain has subsided. So to quote the famous lyrics here, they can see clearly now the rain is gone on that final lap. And I suppose then, looking in the case for Simek, he can see all obstacles in his way as he makes his way down the Mulsanne straight. Right now, as it stands, then 4 seconds up. So that brings about the end of the talks for that fight of the race lead. Not the race lead, sorry, for the last of the podiums. I should have got ahead of myself between Simek and Graham. But nonetheless, that does not take away from what royal rumbling we've seen between Ferrari and McLaren for that last of the podium spots. We see here, making their way into Indianapolis, this is Noah Burkhoff, who has led flawlessly with Mercedes. It's a bit cheeky there, that cut. Very, very cheeky indeed. We see him on his run down towards Arnage. And into the final run of Sector 3 then, not long from seeing the checkered flag. Bit of a slide out there. Don't get cocky that you've led the race now by 70 seconds for this long. There is still a race to be won. So then for Noah Burkhoff, he makes his way into the Porsche curves for the last time today here on what has been a fantastic 90 minutes of racing here in Le Mans, albeit one very troubled for the majority of the grid. We are down the scope of 7 cars, finishing with only 8, so over half, actually just under half, sorry, of the grid is gone for round 2. But of the ones who remain, it's Noah Burkhoff to lead the charge for the last time here, down towards the Ford chicane, just out of Maison Blanche. I'm watching with him here as he rolls down towards the Ford chicane. Then on the run down through the Virage de Recordement. Big slide, though, for the Mercedes. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But without further ado, on the exit of the Virage de Recordement, the checkered flag flies here. Noah Burkhoff wins in Le Mans. A brilliant drive, then, for the Mercedes. Great stuff here in the 90-minute races. 90 minutes of racing we've had here in Le Mans. It's not quite over yet, just in the scope of a daring 2. We do see here, pulling away from the view of things with Noah Burkhoff, on with John McConville. Now, this is of what remains of that podium. Get a look at that gap. 2.3 seconds and dropping as we make our way to the Porsche curves. Mikael Simek could have something up his sleeve here over John McConville. Getting a look at that 1v1. Taking a look at that gap, it drops 6 tenths, now 7, as that Ferrari is in hot pursuit. What has the 36 got up his sleeve here? Well, we're about to find out. The final run of Sector 3. This is in the fight for second place. Watching on with Simek. You can see clear line of sight over McConville in second. Up through towards Maison Blanche. Just on the exit of the karting S's, cutting all the way over the track. This could be risky for him. Out through Maison to the Ford chicane. He might just be a little too far away for it. Let's never say never in that prospect, as we do see very late onto the brakes goes Mikael Simek. He's going for it. He's going for it around the outside, then to the inside. It's side by side, McConville and Simek up over the curves. Goes the Ferrari. It's John McConville for second place in Le Mans. Third for Mikael Simek in glorious fashion. Alfie Graham in a bit of trouble here. What is going on for the little McLaren? Is he out of fuel? I think he might be out of fuel. Well, getting a look with our onboard telemetry can actually show us the energy levels on the car. And it shows he's out of fuel. So he's miscalculated his fuel. Alfie Graham loses out 4th. Steve Derrick moves up into 4th place. Oh my word, as if it couldn't end any more bizarre. Alfie Graham is out of fuel. Steve Derrick sees 4th place. Tvrtko Sojcic could be seeing 5th, as we see there, making his way down through the Ford chicane, then to the Virage du Recordement, down to the line. It's 5th place for Tvrtko Sojcic with Lexus down across the line. What a bizarre result here. Carl Domingo on his way through Arnage. As it stands, is quite a fair distance from the line. As for Alfie Graham, he's out of fuel just on the run into the pits here. And that is a DNF for Alfie Graham. That leaves Domingo for 6th place and Pasqualini across the line there to finish 7th. So then, what a bizarre ordeal these drivers have gone through here at Le Mans. mixed conditions have given rise to some of the most bizarre stuff we have seen. It actually wasn't through Arnage we saw Domingo when we picked up. This is just on the right now through Indianapolis. So Arnage coming up just around the corner. We actually saw him at the exit of Mulsanne. So very surprising stuff here. That's 70 seconds from the line, but getting a look then. Running out wide through Arnage. We'll stay on board with Domingo as we wait to see the last puzzle piece fit in here for the final result on what has been a very bizarre first visit to the Circuit de la Sarre for us here on TRTN. We do hope to visit the track again sometime soon. And this will be, for the time being, the last broadcast we have for Le Mans Ultimate for the foreseeable future. Of course, that's not to say we'll never cover this game again. We are very, very happy to see that the systems, for the most part, you know, touch on wood here, for the most part do work. And it has been, I would say, an otherwise successful test of technology for us here on TRTN. It has proven to us and to our not to our sponsors, but to our clients that yes, the technology is there, it is feasible, it is possible. And we'll be waiting to see where that goes in the future. And it will be likely the case our next collaboration will once again be with MSC, but we can't give you an accurate date of time as to when that will be. So we see then rolling into that final sector then is Carl Domingo. Taking a look then at those race results with the number 31 greeted to the line then for the scope of 6th place at long last then for Carl Domingo. He crosses the line, and taking a look then at the results at the end of today's race. Noah Burkhoff wins in Le Mans. John McConville in 2nd. Mikhail Simek in 3rd. Steve Derrick in 4th. Vertko Sojcic in 5th. Carl Domingo in 6th. Michele Pasqualini in 7th. And then we see the scope of our DNFs. Alfie Graham out of fuel on the last lap there. Francesco Cugino in 9th. David Silf in 10th. On the next page there, we have Callum Amkreutz in 11th. Jonathan Curran in 12th. Robert McCoy 13th. Ruben Thomas 14th. And Archie Bowen in 15th place. That's the end of the road then for this very bizarre visit to the Circuit de la Sarre for us here on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. And if you're joining us here for more MSC related content, we'll be getting off to the first of the rounds here for Season 4 of the MSC ACC GT3 Series this Friday at the same time as today's broadcast. That's all from us now, though, on TRTN. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care and good night.